Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gosztola, managing editor for shadowproof.com and the curator of the Dissenter Newsletter. I want to thank you for joining us and tuning in to this week's edition of the show. We'll be covering whistleblower stories from government agencies, corporations, and other institutions. But first, before we get to the stories that we have picked for this show, please become a subscriber on YouTube, like our videos, share these videos. If you're listening to this as an audio version on Spotify or Apple or Stitcher, please review us, like this show, and follow us there so that we're able to get a boost to our show and more people can be introduced to what we're doing here with the Dissenter. The first story that we have for you this week is a major investigation from USA Today reporters Gina Barton, Daphne Durrett, and Brett Murphy. They completed a year-long investigation into policing, especially the blue wall of silence that exists in police departments across the United States. They examined documents from police, sheriff's departments, prosecutors, oversight groups, and regulators throughout the United States. The reporters obtained confidential federal labor records. They traveled to Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, New York, and Texas to interview officers and survivors of policing. What they produced is award-winning journalism that deserves more attention than the investigation has received. The reporters concluded, quote, departments across the country have adopted an unofficial system of retaliation that allows misconduct to persist and helps police leaders avoid accountability. And while communities of color and other marginalized groups bear the brunt of police brutality, the profession is blind to race, gender, and seniority when it comes to punishing officers who try to expose these practices. In their findings, they were even more clear. Quote, cases of retaliation appeared in every type of department, majority black forces and majority white forces, union and at-will agencies, rural two-man outposts, and massive urban police departments. Perhaps most notably, places that have adopted strict accountability measures. Reforms like body cameras and civilian oversight boards prove virtually worthless when law enforcement leaders and other local officials silence whistleblowers. In other words, as police abolitionists routinely declare, the whole system is rotten. The USA Today team noted that the response to Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin murdering George Floyd led commentators and pundits to declare that the blue wall was crumbling. But as their investigation shows, it's rare for an incident to happen in broad daylight with numerous witnesses and video that captures what happened from several angles. Typically, an officer may only be backed up by the person who survived the policing. There are many parts of this investigation worth highlighting, but for now, I'll highlight the Hurt Feelings Report poster, which was hung on a wall at the police headquarters for a small department in Minnetonka, Minnesota. It's a suburban city that is less than 20 minutes from Minneapolis. And the sign instructed officers who wanted to report a grievance on what to do. It said, please log your time of hurtfulness. Which ear were words of hurtfulness spoken into, the left, the right, or both? Is there permanent feelings damage? Did you require a tissue for the tears? And then there were reasons that a person could give for filing the report. So I am thin-skinned, I am a pussy, I have woman-like hormones, I am a queer, I am a little bitch, I want my mommy, I'm a crybaby, my butt is easily hurt, all of the above. Then it said, please put the name of the real man who hurt your sensitive little feelings, list their name. So the person who committed this misconduct, they could be listed there. We as a company take hurt feelings very seriously. If you don't have a mommy that can give you a hug and make it all better, please let your supervisor know. We can provide you with a surrogate if you need them. Diapers, Midol, and a blankie can also be supplied. And then it said name of little sissy filing the report, girly man's signature, the real man's signature, the person being accused would then sign the complaint, and then a supervisor. So it's a very offensive parody of the form that police officers would typically fill out. A Minnetonka officer who has since left the force was the person who reported this poster to Minnesota labor officials. And they say, I can't go to anyone and have to stay silent. She wrote this in her journal at the time when she was basically dealing with this culture that says you're not allowed to challenge other officers who are engaged in policing, which is destructive and brutal and hurts people within the community. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, which is a part of the Labor Department, has an abysmal track record when it comes to handling whistleblower complaints from workers who are concerned about unsafe and hazardous workplace conditions. Yet stunningly, the agency is planning to rely on whistleblowing workers to enforce a vaccine mandate. Workers will need a vaccination or a weekly test that shows they are not COVID positive if they work somewhere that has more than 100 employees. There is no army of OSHA inspectors that is going to be knocking on employers' doors or even calling them, said Debbie Berkowitz, a former OSHA chief of staff who is a fellow at Georgetown University's Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor. They're going to rely on workers and their union representatives to file complaints where the company is totally flouting the law. Jim Frederick, the acting chief of OSHA, told reporters that his agency will focus on job sites where workers need assistance to have a safe and healthy workplace. That typically comes through in the form of a complaint, Frederick added. We can expect this to fail. In October 2020, the National Employment Law Project found more than half the 1,744 COVID-19 complaints received were dismissed without being investigated. Only 2% were investigated and resolved. OSHA simply provided little to no support for workers trying to survive the first wave of the pandemic. A former regional director for a research organization that was contracted to work on Pfizer's phase 3 vaccine trial has brought attention to lax oversight by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The allegations involve issues of methodical and ethical integrity, though the concerns do not call into question the efficacy of the vaccine. In an article for the British Medical Journal by Paul Thacker, Brooke Jackson, who was employed by the Ventavia Research Group, claims Ventavia staff were overwhelmed by problems found when they conducted quality control checks. The FDA was supposed to monitor the trial, but only inspected 9 out of the 153 sites. None of those sites were Ventavia sites. Jackson wrote an email to the FDA on September 25th complaining about what she witnessed at 3 Ventavia sites in Texas. This included that participants were placed in a hallway after injection and not monitored by clinical staff. The lack of timely follow-up of patients who experienced adverse events. Protocol deviations not reported. Vaccines not stored at proper temperature. Mislabeled laboratory specimens. And the targeting of Ventavia staff for reporting these types of problems. Hours later, the FDA responded, acknowledging her email, and days later, an FDA inspector called to discuss what she had reported, but maintained there was no further information that could be shared. It's unclear whether the FDA conducted an investigation or audit of Ventavia. Ventavia fired Jackson the same day she contacted the FDA. There's just a complete lack of oversight of contract research organizations and independent clinical research facilities, Jill Fisher, a professor of social medicine at the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, told Thacker. Fisher added, quote, people working in clinical research are terrified of FDA audits. However, the FDA typically does little more than look over paperwork months after a trial is completed. I don't know why they're so afraid of them, she added. According to Fisher, it's unusual that an agency would not inspect Ventavia after an employee filed a complaint. You would think if there's a specific and credible complaint that they would have to investigate that, Fisher stated. Thacker noted since Jackson reported problems with Ventavia to the FDA, Pfizer has hired Ventavia as a research subcontractor on 4 other vaccine clinical trials. And these are the COVID-19 vaccine in children and young adults, for the vaccine for pregnant women, a booster dose, as well as an RSV vaccine trial. Aetna, a health insurance corporation, allegedly defrauded the state of Pennsylvania and the U.S. government by assigning tens of thousands of low-income children to doctors that were not in the company's network. They then collected Medicaid funds from the state government without providing medical care to the children, according to a whistleblower who worked as a nurse. As reported by the Philly Inquirer, Carol Wessner worked as a quality management consultant in Philadelphia. The health insurer expanded their coverage under Medicaid to nearly 100,000 low-income children. Yet, Wessner found Aetna assigned those children to dead doctors, doctors that moved out of state, or doctors who did not work in pediatrics. Quote, some providers had no contract with Aetna, Wessner said. The Philly Inquirer also reported that in September 2016, nearly 97% of 747 children enrolled with Aetna for periodic screening. They had not been screened in the prior year. All the while, the insurer was collecting money to care for those children. That's according to the whistleblower complaint from Wessner. Wessner reported to Aetna supervisors in Philadelphia who asked her not to put her findings in writing and then asked her to stop reporting the findings altogether. She was transferred to a new job and then terminated in February 2018, according to the complaint. Nicholas Griffo has been a veteran requirements examiner since 2008 at the VA regional office in Buffalo, New York. He submitted a complaint in January 2020 alleging veterans and their families were wrongly deprived of post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. The Pentagon conducted an investigation. However, 22 months later, the report on the completed investigation was still secret. So Griffo provided the report to the Chicago Sun-Times. This investigation concluded there were problems that have been in existence since 2009. Particularly, known gaps exist in service data for reservists from all branches, as well as National Guard members, because the various military branches have failed to properly log some active duty periods in their records. Hundreds of thousands of veterans were potentially impacted. According to Griffo, veterans' kids were informed that they could not count on money from the GI Bill to pay for their kids' college, but later discovered they could not transfer those benefits. The Sun-Times added most agreed to stay on longer in the military, typically for 4 extra years, to qualify to transfer their GI Bill benefits, which cover up to 4 years of tuition, housing, and books. In some cases, their children already had received money for tuition and other expenses, only to be told later that the veteran parent's service record was lacking. And the government was now demanding they pay back the money they had paid toward tuition and other college expenses. So for those people who are in the poverty draft, who are counting on the military as a way to set their family up for the future, the government was now asking them to give up those benefits that they were owed. And finally, we have a short update on WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. It's good news. Good news from Stella Moris, who is going to be married to Julian Assange. The authorities have backed down. Belmarsh prison and the UK government were threatened with a lawsuit, and they have now decided that Julian Assange and Stella Moris can get married. So this is something, however, we need to take note of as we talk about this political case. The US government is saying Julian Assange would be able to go through the British government and have them advocate for him if he believed that diplomatic assurances were being violated, if they went back on their pledges in relation to confinement conditions and how he would receive mental health care, and whether he could be transferred to Australia to serve his sentence. And this government, we now saw, try and prevent someone from getting married who was in their custody, someone who has mental health issues, who has been under close examination to prevent him from committing suicide. This very thing, having a family, being able to be brought closer to someone that you love, would be a decisive factor in curbing depression, in preventing you from having recurring impulses to commit suicide. So it would seem. And yet they were going to block Julian Assange from getting married. It's something we all need to take into consideration. Thank you for watching the Dissenter Weekly. This is the link for the newsletter if you would like to receive regular coverage of whistleblower stories, as well as updates on WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's case. If you want to know when the appeals court decision is handed down, become a subscriber at thedissenter.org. And there you'll be able to support the kind of journalism that we're doing on whistleblowers and national security, secrecy, etc. So thank you for tuning in to this show, and see you around.